Cool.
Okay.
All right. And we are live. Cool. Well, welcome everybody to the Atlanta JavaScript Meetup hosting the React World Tour. We've got some super duper cool talks as usual scheduled today. Before we get started, wanted to quickly thank our sponsors. We've got Savant Group. They've been with us forever. They're great. Check them out. We've got Cypress.io. If you do testing, you should be using Cypress. If you don't do testing, you should be using Cypress. Definitely check out Cypress for all of your test automation needs. Lots of great stuff there. And then this.labs. Tracy, I don't know, do you want to say a couple words about this dot or?
Yeah. Well, love Atlanta. Just moved here. Well, I guess I moved here 2 years ago during the pandemic, but we are hiring. So definitely would love to chat with you. Or if you're looking for consulting, definitely hit us up. Happy to always chat.
Very cool. Thank you, Tracy. And then I guess I don't really have much else to say other than thank you to the sponsors. So I'm going to turn it over for the actual really good content. So the order of this is a little not accurate. So I think, Shruti, you're going to start. Is that correct?
Yes, I can start.
All righty.
Cool. All right. Hello and welcome everybody to today's meetup. Somebody says glad we're not meeting outside today. It's rainy and a little chilly here in Atlanta. Glad we're not meeting outside because it's rainy and chilly here in San Francisco as well. But hello everybody and welcome to my talk. I'm going to be talking about what's new in React 18. If you can hear me well and you can see my screen well, please say hello, Shruti. So in today's talk, I will be covering three main topics of React 18. These are the three main new features that have come out. Create Root API and automatic batching and start transition. We'll talk about them in a little bit of detail, look at some code, see how it's different, see how to adopt React 18. This talk is geared primarily towards application developers. And hello to everybody who is saying hello in the chat. Before I get started, I want to introduce myself. My name is Shruti Kapoor. I am a software engineer at PayPal. At PayPal, we use React, GraphQL, and we are also hiring at PayPal. So if you are interested, reach out to me on Twitter at Shruti Kapoor08. But if you have been following me on Twitter, you know that I love dev jokes. So of course, we have to do dev jokes here as well. So the way this will work is I'll ask you a question and you can answer in the chat. I have my comments open here so I can see your answers. I'll give you like a few seconds to answer. So just put down whatever answer comes to your mind and then let's get started. All right, first question. Why did the computer keep sneezing? Mouse. Huh, okay. The computer it had a bug. Okay, I like that. I like that. That's very close. It had a virus. Or a virus, you got it this dot. All right, next question. What did the proud React parent say to its kid? What did the React parent say to its kid? I've got to give you props. All right, last one. Why do Node.js developers wear helmets? John says you never talk back. I like that. Fun to react that way. I don't get that. Okay, why do Node.js developers wear helmets? Oh, don't react that way. I get that now. That's funny. Because there's always building. Ooh, I like that. The secure headers. All right. If you want more dev jokes, you can go to GitHub at shrutikapur08/devjoke. All right, let's get started. I know I have 20 minutes. So I'm going to blaze through this presentation, hopefully. So we're going to be talking about a few different features of React 18. But a word of caution before I get started is that this is not an exhaustive list. There's so many more features in React 18, but I'm going to be picking a few ones to talk about. So the three main features we're going to be talking about today is our create root API. Create root API is actually a new API that's out in React 18, which is, as the name suggests, is used to create a root. We'll talk about what is root, what is create root, and how that gets in this topic. Automatic batching is how state updates will be batched, and that will be used to improve the performance. So before there were some state updates that were not batched, but in React 18, this is automatically given to you out of the box. So automatic batching is something that's given to you out of the box once you upgrade to React 18. And we'll talk about concurrent React, but one specific feature is start transition, which we'll talk about and look at some demo examples. Start transition is how you can mark certain updates as urgent and mark them in transition so React knows that these updates need to be transitioned into. One cool thing in React 18, or one thing to note in React 18, is that there is no more concurrent mode. So you no longer have to opt into concurrency. It's something that's given to you out of the box. You can opt out of it, but you don't need to opt into it anymore. Now, React 18 is currently in alpha version as of today, as of yesterday. It will be in beta version soon. But what basically React 18 alpha version means is that a lot of things may break. So be careful when you adopt it into your own application. But the good news is that the upgrade is super easy and it's as simple as doing an npm install React Alpha and updating your React 17 app to use create root API and using the new root. React 18 also, for the very first time, has started React Working Group. All of the discussions are open to the public as well. But React Working Group is actually a group of folks who are community members, are teachers, educators, library maintainers. And the idea is to keep the discussion group open with the rest of the world so that everybody can contribute to it. But working group members are the ones who can look at the new updates and comment and try it out and give feedback to React group. So it's a lot more collaborative starting React 18. But now let's look into React's new create root API. So with React 18, React 18 has introduced the new root API. And before React 18, if you remember, we used to do React DOM.render. Um, and what React DOM.render would do is it would create a root in the background, which would be opaque to the user. And that root basically is actually not a new concept. It's actually like a top level data pointer. So it's like a top level pointer to the data structure that React uses in the background to render the component. But this root used to be opaque to the user, not anymore in React 18. In React 18, you create a root, and that's how you'll render your component. Let's look at an example here. So you may all remember we had React DOM.render, but now with React 18, we wouldn't do React DOM.render, we'd do React DOM.create root. Let's look at it in code. So you may all remember this. This may look very familiar. So we used to create a container, document.get element by ID, and then use React DOM.render to render that container, to render that app into our container. Now with React 18, what we'll do is instead of doing React DOM.render, we'll do React DOM.create root. So we still have the container, but now we'll be creating a root with the create root API that gives us a root, and then we'll be using the root to render our app. So we won't be doing React DOM.render, but instead we'll be doing root.render. So we'll create a root and use that root to render our app. So in short, create root API lets you still use the root and render your HTML container to the root. Root is no longer opaque to the user. The good news is that your current code will still work. Like whatever you have with react.render will still work when you upgrade to React 18. You will just get a warning in your console which will say that react.render is deprecated. So your current code will still work, but you'll just get a warning to update to React create root. One thing to note is that you will not get the new features until you update to React root, create root. So basically, your current app still works, but you won't get the new features such as like automatic patching, start transition. But what React root will allow you to do is make all of the features available, all of the 18 React 18 features available, so you can start using it out of the box. And I talked about like it's easy to upgrade. The only thing you'll see in your console is a warning like this. So your current way of rendering will still work. But if you don't start using create root, the only thing that will happen is that you won't have new features of React 18 out of the box. So you won't have like automatic patching. You won't be able to use that. Speaking of automatic patching, let's look at what automatic patching is. So previously, React used to batch multiple state updates into one if they happen in like a click handler, but something that would be but with the help of automatic patching, even the state updates that happen in like an async promise that would be bashed as well. So for example, let's look at this example. Let's say that there is a set is fetching, there's a state update happening there, there's a set error and set form status. So React would previously execute these as separate state updates, and it would make React re-render the component. With the help of React automatic batching, these are all now going to be batched, and this reduces the number of re-rendering that's going to happen, and therefore helps in the performance of your application. Let's look at a code example. I am going to stop sharing my screen and so reshare my browser. But if you want to check out the code, or if you want to check out it on your own computer, this is the link. I'm going to pause here for a second and try to copy paste this in the chat as well. All right, sweet. Thank you, Tracy, for sharing this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then share it again. All right, great. My screen is visible. Awesome. So I'm going to minimize this so it looks a little bit better. But this is actually it's like a counter app, but basically what's happening in the background is that I'm going to click next to show you what's, and watch out for what's rendered in the console. I'm going to move this up here. All right, so what we're doing here is as we click on next, we see that we are increasing the counter by one and then one again, and then see how many render commits happens here. So let's go back to React 17, reload the page. Okay, so app is now, I've updated my React to React 18 Alpha. I'm using an alpha version here. So this is npm install React 18 Alpha. And now what I'm going to do is, let's say that this is my current React 17 app. I was using react.render. Now what I'm going to do is, remember I said that you need to use create root API. So I'm going to comment this code out. And to upgrade to React 18, we need to add a create root. So we need to create a root here, react.create root. We've got a root here, and then we need to render our app to it. So we're going to do root.render our app to it. So now you saw that that warning went away. The warning said that we need to have React 18. But to show you the difference between React 18 and React 17, let's go back into React DOM.render. And so what happens here is if we look at what the function is doing, or what the code is doing, what it's doing basically here is we have a click handler. That click handler has two counters. So it's using a counter set count, and then it's using a set flag. So we're doing two set updates here, state updates here. Then we have an async function here, fetch something. It's just an async function, and it also has two state updates here. Now in React 17 and earlier, this because it's happening in a click handler, this would be batched, the state update would be batched, but these two that are happening outside of a state handler or a click handler, this is within an async function, it's within a promise, this would not be batched. So these two, set count and set flag, these are considered as two separate state updates. So React renders for each of those. Now let's look at it in an example. So what I'm doing here is every time we do a render and a commit, we're going to log render and commit on the console. So pay attention to how many times we'll have render and commit logged in the console. I'm going to click next, and what it does is we have render and commit here, which comes from here, this update, but then we have two more render and commits, and that comes from these two updates. So as you can see, there's like three updates happening here. Now we're gonna move it to React 18 or start using our create root API. And in the background, it's gonna do automatic batching. And without having to upgrade anything else, we'll see the difference already. So we've gotten one render and commit that comes from here. And then these two state updates are now batched into one. So we have just the one render and commit. Cool. So this was automatic batching. I'm going to stop sharing and then go back to my screen again. All right, great. So that was automatic batching. Basically, what we saw is that with the help of automatic batching, state updates that were previously not batched, like promises, set timeouts, even native click events that happen outside of the React boundary, they will also be batched. And it's really cool because now it'll help you in the performance of your React app and prevent in multiple re-renders. Behind the scenes, what is happening is that React need to know when to actually re-render the component or re-render the app or like batch multiple updates, and it did not know like where to update or did not know which microtask it was. So now with React 18, React knows that those updates happening in an async block are also part of the same microtask. So what it'll do is it'll wait for those microtasks to finish and then update. So it basically gives information to React 18 that anything happening in an async block is also a microtask. In simple words, actually, Dan Abramov explained this really well. And basically, the idea is that you can think of like non-batched updates as getting groceries on demand. So let's say you're cooking something, you're cooking pasta, you open your closet, you have maybe like pasta, you start boiling it, and then you realize you don't have sauce. So you go to the grocery store, bring back sauce. And then you realize you don't have meat. So you go to the grocery store, bring back meat, right? So it's not an efficient way of cooking. You're going to be spending a lot of time re-rendering. And so basically batching is when you write down everything you need to buy, you create like an ingredients list, then you go to grocery store and buy everything all together in one batch, come back and then start cooking. So it's a lot more efficient way of cooking. And so that's basically batching, automatic batching. So basically automatic batching with the help of React 18 is available to you out of the box, but you can opt out of it with the help of Flush Sync if you want to. All right, last feature we're going to look at is going to be Start Transition. Start Transition, basically what it helps you to do is in a UI component, you may have some updates that need to be treated as urgent updates. So for example, let's say you're typing in the browser, you search for something. There's two things happening there. One, you are searching, so you're writing something, and then the cursor is moving one character at a time. And there at the background, the app is actually looking for data to search, or wherever its API is looking for fetching with that API to get the relevant search terms, right? So for example, if you look at this video, think of this as a fast computer and a fast network, right? So let's say that I'm searching here something. I'm searching for something. You see how fast the cursor is moving, my characters are appearing, but also the search results are happening super fast. So this is a great example of how search happens in a really fast computer with a really fast network. Now, let's imagine that the network is slow, or maybe the computer is slow. What do you think the experience should be like? In an ideal world, the experience should be that you should still be able to write whatever you're writing. You should still be able to see that the app is responding to your typing. Even if the network is slow, it's okay if the search results happen slowly. So here's an example to look at for that. So we're typing, this is a slow computer, slow network. We're typing something. The search result don't pop up right away, but at least my text is in the box right away and I can see that something is happening in the app. So my app is not stuck and not just looking for things to search. It still takes some time. That's okay. But at least the urgent update, which is like giving me the feedback that the typing is happening super fast. So that's an urgent update. So what start transition helps you do is mark some of those transitions as urgent updates and mark them as transitions. So mark the non-urgent updates as transitions. And so that lets React know that which ones to prioritize and which one to interrupt. So urgent updates, like typing in the field, that lets React interrupt. That lets React know that this is a high priority task, and anytime an urgent update comes in, React will interrupt to make sure that the urgent update is shown on the screen first. Let's look at it in a code example. So let's say we have a set input value. Imagine this is what Google is doing in the background. So what it's doing is, as we're typing, it's setting an input value. This is just like an input field. So it's doing that set state. And then it's also searching for that text in the background. So let's say that that is a set search query. That's the two set updates, set state updates we have. Now, what we can do is we want to let React know that adding the input or adding the text field, adding value in the text field is an important update. So we want to mark it as urgent. To mark it as urgent, we don't need to do anything. We set it out. We just write our state update, and we want to let React know that searching the query is a non-urgent update. So to mark it as non-urgent update, we can add it in start transition callback, as you can see here. So to recap, anything that's urgent can be can be written as is, but anything that's non-urgent can now be transitioned into with the help of start transition. Now you may think like, what if you want to show something while the transition is happening? Like what if you want to show a loader or something like that? You can use is pending that comes with a use transition hook. So use transition will give you start transition and is pending. So you can use something like that. So is pending can be used to show maybe like a loader. Let's look at some code examples again, and I am going to share my screen again. So here's the first example. I will share this in the chat as well. Actually, I'll share two links in the chat so you can open this at your own time. And thank you, Tracy, again for sharing this. I'll share my screen now. Great. Okay. So this is the first link that I had shared. Now, if you see here, this is kind of like a Pythagoras tree, but don't worry about the math behind it. Basically, what we want to see here is that what's happening. What this app is actually like a really complicated app that renders this tree. And as we grow the tree, the bigger is slower. So I will, to demonstrate the use case of start transition, I'm going to increase the tree a little bit and see how slow it takes to render the tree. And I'm going to refresh this just to make sure it's running. Okay, increase the tree. So the nodes are increased, and then I'm going to lean the tree and see how this app becomes slow. I'm moving the slider pretty fast, but my slider has slowed down because this app is taking a long time to render, and it's still rendering. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use start transition. So in this app, if you think about which one of these is an urgent update, these sliders are urgent updates because the user is going to be moving them. So the user needs to know that the app is responding by moving the slider. This actual re-rendering of the tree is a non-urgent update because it's okay if it doesn't render right away. At least my slider should move right away with my click, right? So now I'm going to use start transition. I'm going to move the slider. And you see how my slider is responding as fast as I am moving, even though my app is not re-rendering, or my app is not rendering the tree as fast, but at least the slider is moving as fast as I am moving. So that's what start transition does. Let's look at another example. So here, this is an example of using multiple tabs, and multiple tabs is rendering different tabs of different rendering a lot of data on the page. And this is also a great example of where start transition could be helpful. So basically, what is happening in this app is that we have like a lot of data in here. I'm going to uncomment start transition and comment set value. So what we want to do in this is that we have a lot of data on this, so it's like a very heavy app, I guess. But when we switch tabs, the urgent update here is switching the tab. So as a user, I need to know that my app is switching tabs, even though the data is not rendering as fast. So when I switch between tabs, you see how it takes a minute to like load and then move to another tab. So that's how this app is slow. And if we move to start transition, now let's try switching between tabs again. So the switching of tabs happens immediately, even though the data is not rendering as fast. So even though the performance of the app itself is slow, it's okay because the user knows that the app is doing something. So it's not stuck. So that's start transition. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and share my screen again. Great. So as you saw in the example, that's what start transition does. So basically, like it's it helps you to manage which of these transitions should be shown to the user right away, even if your app is super heavy, takes a long times. So basically, where can you add start transition? You can add it basically in two places. One is where the rendering of the app itself is really slow and it takes time for React to perform a lot of work. That's where you can let React know to mark certain updates as urgent. Another one is where there is slow network. You will need to use suspense for React 18 for slow network, but that's okay. You can use suspense for now. Now, to determine candidates for start transitions in your app, think about like which updates need to be marked as urgent, which need to be marked as non-urgent. What is the first feedback that a user should get when they're moving something or when they're doing something? And then think about which set states can be transitioned. One important thing to remember is that this works only for set states. This is what I this was a big gotcha for me. I tried to put my fetch sync like fetch promise in it. That doesn't work. It has to be a set state. So think about like which set states can be transitioned into. And another thing to think about is like when we are doing that transitioning, can you use is pending to show some kind of feedback to the user? All right, so big takeaway of React 18 is the introduction of concurrent React. We saw some features like automatic batching and start transition. Concurrency is no longer something that you need to opt into to the root of your application. It's just an enrichment that happens when you start using React 18. Moving to React 18 is fairly straightforward with the help of npm install and create root API. There should be minimal breaking changes. With the help of React 18, you will get concurrent rendering out of the box, which is really great. And moving to React 18 can be done like this. So you do npm install React 18 and you add create root element. So that can give you a root and then you can use that to render your component to that app. Some noteworthy discussion threads in React 18 group that I want to highlight that if you want to learn more, you can go check it out is first of all, this one that I really like, which is Glossary Explain Like I'm 5. It has information on things like like rendering, concurrent, start transition. So if you are interested in React 18, I would definitely check this thread out. Another one is a real world example of adding start transition. React Hanloni, who is working on start transition feature for React 18, wrote this discussion thread. Really cool thread to check out some features as well. Also talks about start transition in detail. Okay, so today we covered features of React 18. We talked about create root API, automatic batching, and start transition. And we looked at a few demo examples to start using start transition in your app, automatic batching in your app, and mark certain updates as urgent updates. Before I end this talk, I want to give a big shout out to React Hanloni for helping me for this presentation. This presentation wouldn't have been possible without his help. So thank you so much, Rick. Also, if you are interested in a synopsis of this talk and some takeaways I will be sending out in my newsletter this week, you can find all of the slides at my GitHub, shruti.8/talks. And thank you so much, you all. You all have been amazing audience. You can find me on Twitter, here, or on Twitch.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I guess who's next? Or do we want to do? Go ahead.
I think Brandon's
Brandon.
next. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure I can see comments. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon, and I am the creator of Blitz.js. And I'm going to give you a quick kind of whirlwind introduction to Blitz. And let's get started. So for the past 4 years, I was like this guy, happily building full stack React apps. I was fully content to put up with the complexity and struggle required to do so. And I did that because I loved building user interfaces with React more than any other way. But the honeymoon ended, and I became increasingly frustrated with everything it would take just to get to ground zero, to all the libraries to install and things to configure before I could even start building features. Anything that got in the way of me building features slowly depleted my morale. I really wanted to love full stack development again. I wanted to be extremely productive again. I wanted to focus on building features instead of doing all the boring stuff that made me want to leave work early. So I decided enough was enough, and I set out to build the best possible developer experience for building full stack React apps. Now, there were two things that I had to have to achieve the developer experience that I was going for. Number one, it had to be monolithic. Monolithic means that there's only one thing to reason about when you're thinking about your application. There's one conceptual thing to develop, one conceptual thing to deploy, and it just is so much simpler versus having all of these sort of microservices that you have to juggle around together. And I got into web programming through Ruby on Rails, which is monolithic. And there's just a level of developer experience and speed that you can achieve with that you can't achieve without it. Secondly is I had to get rid of the API layer. The API layer in React apps is the biggest source of complexity, confusion, slowdowns, headaches, heartaches, etc. And I wanted to get rid of it. But how can you do that? Like I mentioned, I got into web through Rails, and Ruby on Rails is traditionally server-side rendered, and so there's no API. And at the time when I first started Blitz, announced Blitz, this would have been February last year, SSR, server-side rendering, was the only thing that I knew of to get rid of the API layer. And I was like, well, that's important enough to me to let's just make this as a constraint and go for it. And so that's how the initial prototype was. The initial announcement was like that, and people were still excited. But I didn't love it. And so me and the other early Blitz contributors were just thinking and talking and trying to figure out what could the architecture look like. And one day I was laying in a hammock in Thailand pondering this, and I asked myself, what would this look like if it was easy? And I suddenly had this picture flood my imagination of me writing a function that runs on the server, and inside that function I would talk to a database or whatever I needed to do, and then I would import that function directly into my front-end component, and it would just magically work. Basically like a normal function call, except it would magically happen over the network. And I was like, wow, that's super cool. I wonder if that is even possible, if we could even make that work. Well, it turns out we made it work, and it is one of the It is the flagship feature in Blitz.js, and one of the reasons that people tell us that it makes them 5 to 10 times more productive than other stacks. So I'll tell you about that more in a little bit. But first, let's talk about some of the basics about what Blitz is. Next.js, you have most likely heard about it. If you haven't, it's a super solid foundation for building any type of React app. It's a hybrid framework that lets you do all the different kind of rendering modes that you can do. So you can have server-side rendering, or just static, like client-side rendered, or static page generation, like Gatsby has been known for, and then also API routes. And you can do that on a per page basis. So it's super flexible and has automatic bundle splitting built in for your pages, etc. And you can deploy it to a server or serverless. So we were like, hey, Next.js is awesome. It's going to be the perfect foundation to build on. But if you've ever used Next.js to build a full stack application, you'll know that it's super minimal and there's a ton of work that you have to do to use it to build a full stack app. And that's where Blitz comes into play. So Blitz is a fork of Next.js that adds power features for building full stack apps. Now, I want to emphasize that we keep up to date with every Next.js release. So we get all the new features that Next.js adds, but we just, and we stay Next.js compatible, but we just add a bunch of extra stuff on top that makes it even more awesome. All right, secondly is the second kind of normal thing you'll see in a Blitz app is Prisma for the database layer. Prisma is a next generation ORM for Node and TypeScript. And Prisma is really nice. It gives you two key things for the database that you need. So number one is migrations. And it allows you to define your database model using a GraphQL-like syntax. So as you can see here, it's pretty easy to model your database tables and fields. And then you can run a command and Blitz or Prisma will automatically generate the migrations, the SQL migrations for you, update your database, etc. So it's super nice from that point of view. And then secondly is Prisma provides a JavaScript or TypeScript client that allows you to easily read and write from your database without doing any type of SQL queries. It's just a simple thing, as you can see here, db.user.findMany, user.create.delete, etc. And it's really nice, and it's fully typed. So if you're using TypeScript or JavaScript, you'll get autocomplete. You can see all the fields, their types, etc. It's just really awesome. But if you don't want to use Prisma, that's fine too, because Blitz is database agnostic. So you can take out Prisma and add in anything else that you would like. All right, so let's go through a few foundational principles. I've already talked about the first couple: full stack and monolithic, API not required, convention over configuration. This means that you shouldn't have to configure something just to get working. It should work by default out of the box, and then let you configure things optionally if you want. So the opposite is configuration over convention. And that would be something like Webpack, where it doesn't like really even work. It's not useful unless you add a bunch of configuration. Number 4, loose opinions. So we have a number of opinions and recommendations for how to do things, but for the most part, we don't enforce any of those. So we're very flexible. And this is one thing when I was building it that I wanted it to be different than Rails. In Ruby on Rails, it's very difficult to go off the rails, but in Blitz, it's much easier to blaze your own path. Easy to start, easy to scale. So we want it to be really great for people to just get started in very simple apps, but then also scale to the next $1 trillion company. stability. We care a lot about stability, and once we get to 1.0, we'll have some type of stable, predictable release cycle. I think Ember is a kind of a key inspiration there. And lastly, community over code. We really care about the people, and I've been very intentional about building the community from day one. And so we have a lot of awesome people. We recently passed over 2,000 members in our Discord, and everyone's super helpful answering each other's questions. We have a bunch of contributors, and we would love to have for you to join the Blitz community as well. All right, so what will you notice when you start using Blitz? The first thing is you'll see that a bunch of the boring stuff is already done for you. So things like a folder structure is already set up, linting, code formatting, Git hooks, testing, database is already set up for you, forms, and the big one is user sign up, login, logout, authentication is already set up for you by default out of the box. And so you can immediately sign up as a user, log in, log out, etc. And it is just amazing. You have to try it. And then we also have reset password flow in there as well. All right, so remember how I was laying in the hammock in Thailand and I had that picture in my head about importing server code into the front end? So how that actually works is what we call the zero API data layer. We abstract the API into a compile step. So we replace out that function import with a tiny HTTP client that will make the data request over the network for you. So there is an API, just like serverless still has servers. There's still an API here, but you as a developer don't have to mess with it. You don't have to use REST or GraphQL. You just write functions and call functions, and it just works. And in Blitz, these are called queries and mutations. Those are the kind of the magical folders. If you have a queries folder and a mutations folder, you put a file in there, and it's turned into this automatic API thing. All right, so let's look at some live code. All right, so here I have generated a brand new app. I've ran Blitz new React World Tour, and the first thing it does is it asks me a number of questions about what type of app I want to create. So TypeScript or JavaScript, and then you can pick the full template or a minimal template that doesn't include database or anything like that. And then which package manager you want to use and which form library. And then it generates all these files. Now, this is quite a lot of files, so don't be overwhelmed. Most of this code is for authentication. And so take your time to go through it. So what we're optimizing not for like, there's only 2 files here. It's so simple. Because when you go that route, then as soon as you need to build anything real, you have to keep adding a whole bunch of files, going to docs, looking up what it should be, copy, paste, etc. And so we just generate all the files that we know you're going to need if you're actually building something useful. And so just take your time to go through it and get familiar with them. But the good thing is once you understand what these files are, it's the same for every single Blitz app that you come across. So each time you build a new Blitz app, you have the standardized, everything's there for you. If you go work on an existing Blitz app, like very likely they're using this same setup. And so it's very, makes it easy to, like, every Blitz app will have this same kind of familiar feel. So we automatically install the dependencies for you, automatically set up the database, and set up your Git project. So now we're in here and we can run Blitz dev. And it will start a server. And we'll go to the browser. I'm just waiting on my new M1 Max MacBook Pro to arrive, so I don't have to have these awkward waits for the compiler while I'm streaming. Well, there we go. All right. So now we have this just kind of basic getting started. It has some quick tips for you to do. But the thing you'll notice is that there's a sign up and a login button. So let's go ahead and sign up here. Enter an email and password, and boom, we are immediately logged in as a user. We have a user ID, a role, etc. We can log out, log in, and it just works. This is super, super awesome. All right, so now let's kill the server, and let's say we're going to build like a project management app or something. And so we have this command called Blitz.js that lets you scaffold out a bunch of code very easily. So we're going to create a project. So we're going to create all files. So you can create like something else, like just certain things, but we're going to create everything. And we're going to, so the model will be project, and we'll add a name field on that project with a type of string. And we could add more if we wanted to. Okay, let's see what happens. All right, so this created a bunch of files for us. And so a number of pages, and then queries and mutations. So this generates all the files that you need for all the CRUD operations: create, read, update, and delete. So all the basics that you need for getting started all the way, and then it also adds that model to your database. So we're going to say, yes, we want to go ahead and migrate the database. Okay, that's done. And now we can start the server. And now we can go to the /projects page. So this is /projects is one of the pages that it generates. Waiting on the server here. I killed it mid-load. Wow. My computer's having a rough day. There we go. All right. So now we're on /projects, and we can see the list of projects but in our database, but we haven't created any, so there's nothing here. So let's go ahead and click create project, and that takes us to /projects/new. And see, this is a name field because that's what we actually technically, no matter what attribute you pass at Blitz generate, is going to create a name field right here. But we have a PR in progress that will be coming soon that will automatically scaffold out all the input fields exactly from the Blitz generate command. So let's do meetup, and that will create that project, and boom, that project is created. We're at projects/1, which is the ID of 1. And you can see the data that's been loaded from the database. Now we could edit this, delete, or go back and see the list of projects. And it all just, works. So that's all set up, ready for you to style and customize as you wish. So let's look quickly at just a couple of the code files here. So let's look at, oops, I can see that I haven't changed my Vim config from dark to light. Let's fix that. All right, there we go. Okay, so this is the get project query function. Just reformatting this a little bit to make it easier to read. Okay, so a query or a mutation both exports a default function where that signature is an input argument is the first, some input is the first one, and then context is the second one, and then it returns some type of result. Okay, so that's it's a very simple signature, but we have this resolver.pipe. It's a functional pipe utility that pipes the input from one function to the next. And we have this in here by default because it really simplifies a lot of the TypeScript stuff and authorization. So the first thing in this pipe is this Zod utility, where we use Zod to validate your input data. Zod is a really great library. It's like Yup for just input validation, form validation, etc. And we have it installed for you, set up. So this will validate the input to make sure that your input data is valid. And then secondly, we call resolver.authorize, which is going to ensure that you're logged in. Okay, so if we're not logged in, you'll get an error. And then you can also pass a specific role. So if you want only admins to be able to access this, then you can add in the admin role here. And then you'll not only have to be logged in, but have that correct role. And then we get to the actual business logic, or like something specific to this Git project. We take in an ID, and then we call Prisma db.project.find first, and we look for the project with that ID. We return that, and then if it doesn't exist, we throw an error, and then otherwise we return that project. Okay, so that's very simple. There's no HTTP stuff here. All right, so how do we use this? Well, let's go to the project ID page, and we import that Git project. So that function we were just looking at, we just import it straight here. And we pass it to the use query hook, which comes from Blitz. You pass that in there, and then your arguments, which is, in this case, is project ID, which comes from the URL. Okay, and that just returns a project. And then you can just use it. It just magically works. And you'll see that the TypeScript works automatically. So you get auto completion here. Hold on, project dot. So you can see there's ID, name, created at, updated at. It's just all works there without any, just magically. So your types flow all the way from the database. This comes from the database all the way to the front end. Your data gets there without any REST or GraphQL, and it's super cool. So you'll have to go try it out on your own. All right. We have a few more. Just a couple quick slides I'll breeze through. So we have a fully typed routes manifest, which lets you, gives you static typing for all your routes. And then it allows you to move your pages around without breaking your links. So this is something that's really powerful. We have Blitz recipes, which allows you to set up third-party integrations, super easy, super quick. And we have, sorry, I was just checking the chat there. We have Blitz console, which allows you to run one-off commands in your console. This is very similar to Rails console, if you're familiar with that. We have features for letting you easily add social login. We have middleware. We automatically serialize and deserialize dates for you, things like that. So lots of powerful features you have to check out. We are getting close to 1.0, hopefully by the end of the year. But we already have thousands of companies all around the world using us in production, including companies like Agolia and GraphCMS. And then you can see the rest here. So one fellow said that he had been using Rails professionally for 10 years. And after just a few months with Blitz, he was already 10 times more productive than he ever was with Rails. So that's some high praise. If you go to this link, blitz.js.com/fame, you can see a bunch of other things that people are saying about Blitz. So how can you use Blitz? Well, install the global CLI and run Blitz new and give it an app name, and you'll be off to the races. So we are open source projects. We would love for you to be involved any way you can. This page linked tells you how to get started, but we're very friendly to new contributors, and we'd love to have you help us. All right, one last thing is my new project, flightcontrol.dev, and it's a optimized deployment solution for deploying full stack Blitz or Next.js applications. So if that's interesting to you, go to flightcontrol.dev, check out more about it, and sign up for our wait list. All right. The best place to go to learn more about Blitz is blitz.js.com. And I am Flybear on Twitter, and blitz_js is on Twitter. And last but not least, go to blitz.js.com/stickers. Put in your email address, or sorry, not your email, your physical address, and we will mail you free stickers anywhere in the world. We have a bit of a backlog right now, so it may take a little bit to get to you, but we will get you free stickers. And that's all for me. Thank you so much.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Brandon. And stickers, I mean, who doesn't want stickers? Can never have enough. It's always fun sending them across the world and then seeing them pop up online. So that's very cool. Well, I guess, Tracy, are you up now? Are you gonna?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. I'm excited to be talking today. Go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Let's see. There we go. All right. So today I'm going to talk about enterprise GraphQL. And one of the reasons why I love this talk is that I feel like a lot of us, work at companies and, want to use GraphQL and don't really have, we hear about it, right? Like, okay, we're going to use GraphQL. Obviously, it makes sense, right? But a lot of times the people that, might be running the project might be like, well, what's this new technology? Why do I have to use it? Should we even invest in a new technology, et cetera, et cetera? And there's not really a good framework to, have good conversations about it. So that's kind of the approach I'm doing with this talk today. It's called Enterprise GraphQL and how to leverage and upgrade your stack. So my name's Tracy again. I'm the CEO of a company called This.Labs. We're a JavaScript consultancy, love all the different technologies. Also Google developer expert for Angular and the web, Microsoft MVP, and generally on the ArcsJS core team as well. Generally just love community. You can always find me on Twitter at LadyLeet, and I'm always happy to chat. Yes, and Ristan, it's so nice to meet you as well. My day job is pretty fun. We get to work with a lot of really great clients. So this is also how I meet people. We are hiring. We're hiring engineering managers and senior software engineers. Don't be scared to just apply if you're interested. And I love talking to people. So come hang out. We're 100% remote and worldwide. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a simple, what is GraphQL, GraphQL versus REST. Again, the arguments here and the conversations are really to help structure you all to have better conversations with your teams about why GraphQL could potentially be better for REST. We'll talk a little bit about the enterprise adoption, migration strategies, GraphQL in action, and then a little bit about the GraphQL ecosystem as well. So to start, what is GraphQL? Well, this is hopefully all of you know what GraphQL is, but if you don't, it basically helps you build a complete and understandable description of your data through your API's definition. So it does this through defining your data entities as types with statically typed fields. Yay for typing. And the great thing about this is when you have this knowledge, it allows the consumer to specify what data it would like to retrieve, how it's able to manipulate the data or listen to changes on specific data. And that is so powerful because then the consumer can be picky about what data it needs to fulfill any given request, right? Or it empowers it to know like what data it needs to submit a request. So that gives us a lot of advantages over REST, which is why, again, we're seeing so much strong adoption across enterprise organizations. Shruti is really involved in GraphQL. PayPal has been a strong adopter of GraphQL. I think one of the other great things about GraphQL that I love is that it helps lower the communication between the client and API teams. Developing a common schema so that your team can, communicate effectively with each other, create product resiliency, and decrease time to market is like amazing. So I think one of the things to acknowledge is that, The most expensive and resource-intensive, time-consuming part of client-to-API communications comes from the HTTP request and response process, right? So let's go ahead and look at that really quickly and talk again about GraphQL and REST and how GraphQL kind of solves these problems. So if you look at, just simply, if you look at this, you can see that GraphQL generally is just very declarative, right? So in this example, we're just running a query to retrieve a single user record by its ID and returns that record's ID, name, email, and role. On the left, you'll see the query where we're defining the query's name, which query operation to use with the specified inputs and a list of the fields that we would like returned. And on the right, you'll see the JSON response body returned containing a node with our query and the data received. So again, you'll note that it's awesome how the structure of the return data matches the structure of the initial request. So I think one of the first major problems that GraphQL solves is improving performance by optimizing the data retrieval process, right? So with REST, of course, one of the key problems is underfetching. You're not getting back enough data. So if that happens, then you have to either make multiple calls to fetch all the required data, or the client has to provide additional query parameters. It's poorly documented. It's hard to understand. But GraphQL comes in and says, hey, you're able to request the exact data you need in full with a single request and eliminate all the multi-requests. And you can specify the additional data in a clear manner. So what? So magical. Why isn't everyone using GraphQL? There's reasons, obviously. But on the other side, you also have overfetching, right? Because REST doesn't really provide an out-of-the-box mechanism for us to retrieve only the data we need from a request. Unfortunately, clients can sometimes have to consume or parse or handle too much data, or the server responses take too long because the requests have become too large, or things just time out, right? That is not fun. So with GraphQL, the great thing again is that you can just remove all the superfluous data from the request and reduce the payload size and the data required to parse, and life should be amazing. So, suppose you have a requirement to display a list of users to view in a table with, let's say, their last comment and post, right? The user object can be really large and contain tons of different fields and properties like comments, posts, when they were created, last updated, et cetera, et cetera. But, let's say you don't need all that information, right? You can see how we could have requested this data in a REST API. It gives us all the user fields and a list of all their comments and posts. But those requests is going to take much longer to return because the client has to parse way more data. We don't know the exact shape of the data, and the user is now paying the price of the slow response and render time. But with GraphQL, again, amazing, because you can just select the data you need, done. Now you only have the lightweight response data to display, and the server response and the client render are both reduced in terms of the size. I think another issue is the all or nothing, right? So typically when an error occurs while processing a request in traditional REST, the full request fails, and we're typically left with like a 4x or 5xx like error code, right? And an empty data response. The all or nothing approach is, pretty bad experience, right? Because the client only knows about the error that occurred and none of the potentially retrieved data. But GraphQL allows for better user experience because it returns all the retrievable data and any errors that occurred. So now instead of a blank error page, or other client error handling, you can just show the user a partial response and inform them, hey, errors occurred. So that's nice too. I think batching is also a big issue, right? So batch support. So in out-of-the-box REST, you can only hit a single endpoint and retrieve data for a single data set at a time. But with GraphQL, it comes with batching operations for your API to be processed out of the box. And this really helps support data intensive pages like dashboards. I mean, who isn't building a dashboard these days, I feel like, where data is retrieved, aggregated, and displayed from a potential like multitude of sources. And again, this often causes long load times, right? So here you can see kind of like the example, right, where we see our query operations batched in a single query request. Now we only have to wait for a single response and do a single re-render with the retrieved data, which is amazing. And there's also server client tooling like Apollo, where you can actually automate this batching and write components with their individual operations, and Apollo just group them into a single request to the server. So I think that's the other thing I really like about GraphQL, like the tooling that is around it and kind of the ecosystem that's been developing. Enterprises also are significantly spending a lot of time adopting GraphQL, which I think, again, is amazing. We've seen this in the past 2 years. I wish it was faster, but, you know, I mean, that's life. But I think one of the best reasons for adopting GraphQL is, again, just like the separation of concerns, right? When you adopt a GraphQL middleware layer, I mean, this isn't something that all enterprises choose to adopt, right? But if you do decide to go with a GraphQL middleware layer, it can be really useful. Because again, the API is just concerned then about how to retrieve and return data instead of building out multiple endpoints. I'm sure a lot of you have been on teams where it's like, just waiting on that new endpoint, right? And you know, that kind of like alleviates some of that pain, right? I think another thing that's really amazing about the GraphQL middleware layer is it helps increase API flexibility and decreases all the API development that's typically needed over time. Because the middleware layer, again, just exposes one connection for clients to consume, centralizes the business logic, and all the other things, centralizes the other things like request logging and authentication. And the structure and definition of the data is actually provided by GraphQL. So also the client can just focus on consuming the data it needs and less about how to retrieve it. So again, a lot less developer time, a lot less developer work, a lot less pain. Another benefit of this is API teams then can slowly migrate monolithic API architectures to a microservices architecture. So I do see a lot of pushback a lot of times from the backend teams, but they don't realize how GraphQL will set them free, right? Because now if GraphQL is responsible for client interaction, APIs can now just evolve over time with business requirement changes without the client having to make a bunch of changes to accommodate these changes. And you know, if your company isn't ready for a microservices architecture, GraphQL can strictly act as like a proxy to your data. So really benefit on both sides of the team for developers. I think another thing I really love about GraphQL is just the fact that you can just do faster prototyping and faster development, right? There's tons of ways to approach GraphQL adoption. We typically like to go the schema first approach. So you can start by defining the data structure, building out your schema, adding the types and queries, mocking out the data response. And the client can immediately see the definition of the data as it evolves and can start developing against it using the mock everything while the real API and data layers are built out and validated. And I think that's awesome because, again, you're just not waiting for, you know, one team to finish one thing. You can go a lot faster, I feel like, on the client side of things. Now, it does require, of course, the client and API teams to both agree to something. But again, I think this is like the benefit of, you know, GraphQL kind of helping from a communication standpoint, right? You have to agree on a data structure while development is occurring, but decrease development cycles, right? And decrease time to market. So another reason why GraphQL in enterprises is really important is because it's such a great and natural fit for component-driven architectures. So, you know, if you know the structure and definition of your data, your components can request and retrieve only the data that they need to interact with, right? And then that means, okay, all of a sudden you're able to create an architecture with smaller stateless components that can easily be reused and composed to be ingested by stateful components. And again, really, really, really valuable. Another thing that I love, because I love any types of types, yes. But there's a very strong typing system in GraphQL. So it forces you to define what fields are required, the types of those fields, right? So that means components can be written in a more intuitive and data-driven way, making them less error-prone, hopefully more resilient, less value checking overall, hopefully. And I think that's amazing. Also, like, because mutation inputs are also strongly typed, GraphQL informs the component of what fields will be required and what the types of those fields are. So there's no more like guessing if you need an int or a double, etc., or if those values need to be like formatted in a specific way, right? Again, it's just a much better user experience and really helps decrease those development cycles. There's a lot of ways, like I have these conversations a lot about adopting GraphQL and like, okay, well, how do I go about it, right? So I'll talk a little bit about that really quickly. Again, we kind of recommend starting with your schema. We feel like it's the most effective way to go. There's here's an example schema, for example. And I think another thing is, once you have a schema, then you can actually just concern yourself with how to get data, right? So utilizing the power of resolvers, right? I feel like this is a lot in the power of GraphQL. So the resolver's job is when data is requested, it's responsible for retrieving that data. So this can be done in whatever way you define, like a call to your service layer, directly to your database or data layer, or even an HTTP call to another service. And not only are resolvers responsible for retrieving the data for a query, but they can also be utilized to resolve individual fields in a data type, which is also amazing. So this is an example of a resolver in Node with Nest, and Lauren did mention Nest, where we define our user resolver, which will be responsible for retrieving data for our user queries. If you remember from our SDL slide, we defined two queries, users and user. And this is just connecting those queries with the functionality responsible to retrieve that data, right? So, yeah. Migrations also are, I think, another reason why GraphQL is so amazing in the enterprise. So the goal is to allow teams to communicate, to define and build out a schema, right? And as this build out is occurring and the middleware is being developed, clients can begin incrementally adopting and utilizing this layer with ease. So this again is like sometimes when people look at technologies, especially GraphQL, it's like, okay, do we have to turn it on, turn it off? Do we have to go no rest all of a sudden? Like, how do we need to do this? But you don't have to go crazy about it. You can, again, do very easy incremental adoption, right? And I think the power of this is definitely like any adoption, I feel like, will start increasing productivity and engagement of engineers, because they're going to start being able to quickly utilize it, see the power of GraphQL as it's continuously built out. And it's going to start simplifying the code base as the business logic is centralized and moved out from the client code. So you don't have to go all or nothing. If you do a slow incremental migration, you'll see again the power immediately. And I think I love that too, because I feel like as you start migrating generally to new technologies, like you see what can be. You see the power and what can be built on top of what you're currently building, which is amazing. And, John, I love your comment. After working with GraphQL this year, REST feels archaic. I mean, REST is, useful in other ways, but I'm definitely on the GraphQL train, if you guys can't tell by now. So I hope some of these slides, like, just generally helps you all, like, have conversations with business. Because again, I think, I talk to so many companies and teams thinking like GraphQL. I mean, I think developers mostly, especially front-end developers, like really want to use GraphQL generally, right? But I've seen them have a hard time convincing backend teams. So when backend teams realize that like GraphQL can actually help them too, hopefully they'll be happier. And then I think also there's a lot of just general business reasons as to why GraphQL would be amazing for, you know, for companies to just go faster generally, right? Like the prototyping, you know, the just like being able to build things out faster. And again, I think like as developers, sometimes we're just like, hey, we just want to use the new technologies, or at least, sorry, that's not, well, maybe sometimes that is what we do. But I feel like business also sometimes feels that like, well, you want to use this new thing just because it's new and shiny, right? But they don't see why the power of GraphQL is so useful. So again, hopefully some of these slides kind of helped you build a better conversations around why your company should potentially adopt GraphQL generally. So another thing, again, that I mentioned earlier is GraphQL's amazing ecosystem, right? There's so many things in GraphQL that help you be successful. And, you know, it's very similar to like, I feel like what Brandon from Blitz is building out, right? Like React all of a sudden is just becoming like the JavaScript underneath, right? And then there's this like amazing tool on top of it. So Apollo, I feel like is very synonymous with GraphQL these days. It's the most popular GraphQL implementation, I feel like. It provides tooling to help you aid in building, querying, and managing your app's data graph. Ships with Apollo server that helps you build out your graph's SDL and connect it with existing data sources. The platform, again, also supports the incremental adoption. So again, less scary, I feel like, from an adoption perspective. It also ships with REST data sources. Well, it's a REST data sources tool for integrating your REST APIs quickly and easily. Apollo Federation allows for a gateway to sit in front of one or more of your APIs implementing services. Apollo platform also has Apollo Client. So it has libraries for, you know, the most popular front-end libraries, including React and Angular. Has built-in cache and state management tooling out of the box. I mean, there's just a lot of amazing things if you haven't checked out Apollo, so definitely do that. AWS Amplify and AppSync, definitely really popular. You know, it's a tool. This is a tool chain created by AWS to quickly and easily create, configure, and deploy scalable web apps in the AWS ecosystem. AppSync uses your schema to create, configure, and maintain the required AWS resources. There's a first-class API gateway support and Lambda functions that help expose your GraphQL API. And, you know, if you haven't checked this out yet, it's really great to help accelerate your app development. Hasura, also a great tool if y'all haven't checked it out. But this directly connects with your database and builds out a GraphQL given your database schema. Awesome. And it currently supports Postgres and MySQL with other database support coming out into the future. I don't know if they've had any recent announcements for more, but definitely check out Hasura if you haven't yet. And there's also GraphiQL. GraphiQL is one of my favorite tools. Well, GraphiQL and GraphQL Playground, right? They're both IDEs for testing your queries, mutations, and subscriptions. They'll connect to your GraphQL endpoint and allow you to explore your schema side by side. And then Playground can actually also be enabled on your server and directly connected. So yeah, just like really fun things again happening and a lot of really great things happening generally in the GraphQL ecosystem. We also host State of GraphQL and GraphQL Contributor Days. So you should definitely check that out too. I really enjoy GraphQL Contributor Days because it's like 30-something people who are working on GraphQL ecosystem stuff, a lot of people from the GraphQL Foundation, and just being able to listen in on like what's happening, what's new, what's the latest, and, you know, also being able to participate in the chat on, hey, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Is really useful. And then also there's a State of GraphQL that I host with Eve from Moon Highway, or have hosted in the past from Eve from Moon Highway. This happens twice a year, and you can definitely check that out too. All the stuff is on this.media. And yeah, so we're hiring. Definitely email me if you want. You can always email me, Tracy at this. I am local to Atlanta now, and I will be here for a while. So also hit me up if you have any like good food recommendations, because I'm always looking, and I'm always having good conversations with Randall about food that I've recently found.
Indeed, yeah. Super glad you're local now, and you said for a long time. So I
Yes.
think this is being recorded, so we'll hold you to it.
Yeah.
Cool. I just had a couple closing slides that I just wanted to share
Yeah,
with
for
folks.
sure.
We've got an event coming up. The We Are Developers JavaScript Congress is coming up. Check it out here. And we have one other event, which I cannot recall off the top of my head, but we will definitely send out an email. And I think that they gave us some free tickets, or at least a discount code. So I'll send that shortly. Closing really just with two things. One, opportunities. Cypress is hiring literally in every place you could possibly imagine, and some that you couldn't imagine. So if you're interested, check out the openings at cypress.io/jobs. And if you don't see something that could be a fit, you can hit me up, and I can maybe see if we can pass your resume or yourself along to someone for a position that's not yet kind of defined. And then I had a slide for you, Tracy, but you've mentioned it so many times.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to, mention it again, but I know you're hiring.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of folks here online who are not from the Atlanta community, so hit me up. I mean, both myself and Randall, I feel like we're happy to always just like chat and hang out. And, I think that's where opportunity comes, right? It's like you just have to open the door, say hi, and then like you never know.
Absolutely. No, completely agree with that. And then if you are looking to hire, you're looking for an opportunity, we still have our job board up, so you can access that here at this URL. And then obviously follow us, please, everywhere, so that you can stay up to date on what we're doing and see what we've done in the past. Recording of this, I believe, should also be posted. This event should also be posted to our YouTube channel as well. And last but not least, I'll close with my favorite quote, favorite slide. A candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. So if you want to get involved with this group, either by presenting, planning, anything, hit me up. We're down to totally work on something. As Tracy said, always have good conversations. So with that, I'll just close it out, and thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, y'all.